complete Grimm's fairy tales, the knapsack, the hat, and the horn. There was once upon a time three brothers who had fallen deeper and deeper into poverty, and at last their need was so great that they had to endure hunger and had nothing to eat or drink. Then they said, I cannot go on like this. We had better go into the world and seek our fortune. They therefore set out and had already walked over many a long road and had many a blade of grass, and yet they had not met any good luck. One day they arrived in a great forest in the midst of if it was a hill. And when they came near, they saw the hill was all silver. And then spoke the eldest. Now I have found good luck I wished for, and desire nothing more. And he took as much silver as he could possibly carry. And when he turned back and went home, the two others said, we want something more from good luck than just mere silver. And they would not touch it, and they went onwards. After they had walked for 2 days longer without stopping, they came to a hill which was all gold. The second brother stopped and took thought for himself, and was undecided. What shall I do? He said. Shall I take for myself so much of this gold to have sufficient of it for the rest of my life, or shall I go further? At length he made his decision, putting as much into his pockets as would go in, and said farewell to his brother and went home. The third said, silver and gold do not move me. I will not renounce my chance of fortune. Perhaps something better will still be given to me. And so he journeyed onward when he walked for 3 more days. And there he came to a forest which was still larger than the one before, and never would come to an end. And he found nothing to eat or drink, and he was all but exhausted. When he climbed a high tree to find out up there, he could not even see the end of the forest, but so far as the eye could pierce, he saw nothing but tops of trees. Then he began to ascend the tree again, and hunger tormented him, and he thought to himself, oh, if I wish I could eat my fill once more. And he got down and saw with his astonishment a table beneath the tree richly spread with food, a stream of which rose up to meet him. This time, he said, my wish has been fulfilled at the right moment. And without inquiring who had brought him the food, uh, who had cooked it, or he approached the table and ate with enjoyment until he had appeased his hunger. When he was done, he thought it would be, after all, a pity if the pretty little tablecloth were spoilt in the forest here, and he folded it up tidily and put it in his pocket. And then he went onwards. And in the evening, when his hunger once more returned to him, he wanted to make trial of the little cloth, and spread it out, and said, I wish you to be covered with great cheer again. And scarcely had the wish crossed his lips when many dishes, the most exquisite food on them, were put onto the table, and there was a room for it. Ah, now I perceive, he said, in what kitchen is my cooking being done? You shall be dearer to me than mountains of silver and gold. And for he saw plainly that it was a wishing cloth. The cloth, however, was still not enough able for him to sit down quietly at home, and he preferred to wander about the world and pursue his fortune further. One night he met in a lonely wood a dusty black charcoal burner who was burning charcoal there, and had some potatoes by the fire on which he was going to make a meal. Good evening, Blackbird, said the youth. How do you get on in your solitude? One day is like another, said the charcoal burner, and every night potatoes. Have you my mind to have some, and will you be my guest? Many thanks, replied the traveller. I won't rob you of your supper. You did not reckon on a visitor, but if you will put up with what I have, you shall have my invitation. What is it to prepare for you? Said the charcoal burner. I see that you have nothing with you, and there is no one within 2 hours' walk who would give you anything. And yet there shall be a meal, answered the youth, and better that you have ever tasted. Thereupon he put out his cloth out of his knapsack, and spread it on the ground, and said, little cloth, cover yourself. And instantly boiled meat and baked meat stood there, and hot and fresh as just to come out of the kitchen. The charcoal burner stared with wide open eyes, but did not require much pressing. He fell to, and thrust larger and larger mouthfuls into his mouth. And when he had eaten everything, the charcoal burner smiled contentedly. Listen, your little tablecloth has my approval. It would be a fine thing for me in this forest, where no one ever cooks for me anything good. I will propose an exchange for you. There is a corner hangs a soldier's knapsack, which is certainly old and shabby, but in it lies concealed wonderful powers. But I can no longer use it. I will give it to you for the tablecloth. I must first know what these wonderful powers are, answered the youth. That I will tell you, replied the charcoal burner. Every time you tap it with your hand, a corporal comes with 6 men armed from head to foot, and do whatever you command them. So far as I'm concerned, said the youth, if nothing else can be done, we will exchange. And then he gave the charcoal burner the cloth, and took the knapsack from the hook, put it on, and bade him farewell. When he had walked for a while, he wished to make trial of the magical powers of the knapsack, and tapped it. Immediately the 7 warriors stepped up to him, and the corporal said, "What does my lord and ruler wish for?" "March with all speed to the charcoal burner and demand my wishing cloth back." And they faced to the left, and it was not long before they had brought back what he required, and had taken it from the charcoal burner without many questions. The young man bade them to retire and onwards, and hoped his fortune would shine yet more brightly. By sunset he came to another charcoal burner, who was making his supper ready by the fire. "If you will sit and eat some potatoes with salt, but I have no drippings. So come and sit down with me," said the sooty fellow. "Oh, no," he replied, "this time you shall be my guest." And he spread out his cloth, and was instantly covered with the most beautiful dishes. They ate and drank together, and enjoyed themselves heartily. After the meal was over, the charcoal burner said, "Up there on the shelf lies a little old worn out, which has strange properties. The moment someone puts it on and turns around, it goes on his head, and cannons go off as if 12 are fired all together, and they demolish everything, so that no one can withstand them. The hat is of no use to me, and I will willingly give it to you for your tablecloth." "Huh, that suits me very well," he answered, and he took the hat, put it on, and left the tablecloth behind him. But hardly had he walked away that he tapped on the knapsack, and the soldiers had to fetch the cloth again. "One thing comes on top of another," thought he, "and I feel as if my luck has not yet come to an end." Neither had his thoughts deceived him, and after he walked on for the whole day, he came to a third charcoal burner, who, like the previous ones, invited him to potatoes without drippings. But he let him dine from the wishing cloth, and the charcoal burner liked it so well, at last he ordered him a horn for it, which had very different properties from those of the hat. The moment someone blew on it, the walls and fortifications fell down of all villages and towns, and they became ruins. For this he immediately gave the charcoal burner the cloth, but afterwards sent his soldiers to demand it back. So at length he had the knapsack, hat, and horn, all three. "Now," he said, "I am a made man, and it's time for me to go home and see how my brothers are getting on." When he reached home, his brothers had built themselves handsome houses with their gold and silver, and were living in clover. He went to see them, but as he came in a ragged coat and his shabby hat on his head and an old knapsack on his back, they would not acknowledge him as their brother. They mocked him and said, "You give out that you are a brother who despised silver and gold and craves something still better for himself. Such a person arrives in his carriage of full splendor like a mighty king, not like a beggar." And they drove him out the door. And then he fell into a rage and tapped his knapsack, and 150 men stood before him head to foot, and commanded them to surround his brother's houses. And two of them were taken with to take hazel sticks with them, and beat the two insolent men until they knew who he was. A violent disturbance broke out, and people ran together and wanted to lend the two some help in their need, but against the soldiers they could do nothing. News of this at length came to the king, who was very angry, and ordered the captain to march out with his troop and drive the disturber of the peace out of the town. But the man with the knapsack soon got a great body of men together, who repulsed the captain and the king, so that they were forced to retire with bloody noses. And the king said, "This vagabond is not yet brought order." And the next day there was still a larger troop against him, but they could do even less. The youth still set more and more men about them, and in order to be done sooner, he turned the hat twice round his head, and heavy guns began to play, and the king's men were beaten and put to flight. "And now," he said, "I will not make peace until the king gives me his daughter for a wife, and I will govern the whole kingdom in his name." And he caused this to be announced to the king. And the latter said to his daughter, "Necessity is a hard nut to crack. What else is there for me to do but he who desires it? If I want peace and to keep the crown on my head, I must give you away." So the wedding was celebrated, but the king's daughter was vexed that her husband should be a common man who wore a shabby hat and put on an old knapsack. She longed to get rid of him, and night and day studied how she could accomplish this. Then she thought to herself, "Is it possible that his wonderful powers lie in the knapsack?" And she feigned affection and caressed him. And when his heart was softened, she said, "If you would but lay aside that horrid knapsack, it makes you look so ugly that I can't help but be ashamed of you." "Dear child," he said, "this knapsack is my greatest treasure, and as long as I have it, there will be no power on earth that I am afraid of." And he revealed to her the wonderful virtue with which he was endowed. Then she threw herself in his arms as if she were going to kiss him, but cleverly took the knapsack off his shoulders and ran away with it. As soon as she was alone, she tapped it and commanded the warriors to seize their former master and take him out of the royal palace. They obeyed, and the false wife sent still more men after him, who were to drive him quite out of the country. Then they would they would have been ruined if he had not had the little hat, and hardly were his hands free before he turned it twice, and immediately the cannons began to thunder and demolished everything, and the king's daughter herself was forced to come and beg for mercy. As she entreated in such moving terms and promised to better her ways, she allowed himself to be persuaded and granted her peace. She behaved in such a friendly manner to him, and acted as if she loved him very much, and after some time managed so to befool him again, and he confided to her that if someone got the knapsack into his power, he could do nothing against him, so long as the old hat was still his. She knew the secret, and she waited for him to be asleep, and then she took the hat away from him and had it thrown into the street. But the horn still remained to him, and in great anger he blew it with all his strength, and instantly all the walls, fortifications, towns, and villages toppled down and crushed the king and his daughter to death. And had he not put the horn down and blown it just a little longer, everything would have been in ruins, and not one stone would have been left standing to get on top of another, and no one opposed him any longer, and he made himself king of the whole country.